From the dawn of human consciousness, freedom has been heralded as the ultimate aspiration, the pinnacle of human existence. It is the rallying cry of revolutions, the cornerstone of democracies, and the dream of every individual who has ever felt the weight of oppression. But what is freedom, truly? Is it an inherent right, a universal truth, or merely an illusion crafted by society to pacify the masses? This question has haunted philosophers, politicians, and ordinary people alike for centuries. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the 18th century philosopher, famously declared, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." This paradoxical statement captures the essence of the human condition. We are born with the potential for freedom, yet from the moment we enter society, we are bound by its rules, norms, and expectations. But are these chains necessary for order, or do they stifle our true nature? And if freedom is so fundamental, why does it seem so elusive? To understand freedom, we must first define it. At its core, freedom is the ability to act, think, and exist without constraint. But this definition is deceptively simple. In reality, freedom is a multifaceted concept shaped by culture, history, and individual perception. For some, freedom means political liberty, the right to vote, speak, and assemble without fear. For others, it is economic freedom, the ability to pursue wealth and opportunity. And for many, it is personal freedom, autonomy to live life on one's own terms. But here lies the contradiction. Can true freedom ever exist in a world governed by laws, hierarchies, and social structures? Even in the most democratic societies, freedom is not absolute. It is always balanced against the needs of the collective. For example, the freedom to speak one's mind is limited by laws against hate speech. The freedom to pursue wealth is constrained by taxes and regulations. And the freedom to live as one chooses is often curtailed by societal expectations and cultural norms. This raises a profound question. Is freedom an inherent human right, or is it a privilege granted by society? In nature, there are no laws, no governments, no rules. Animals live by instinct, driven by the need to survive and reproduce. But humans, with their complex societies, have created systems of control to maintain order. These systems, while necessary, inevitably limit individual freedom. So, is freedom a natural state, or is it a construct of civilization? The ancient Greeks grappled with this question long before modern philosophers. In Athens, the birthplace of democracy, freedom was seen as the highest virtue. Yet, even in this enlightened society, freedom was reserved for a select few free men who owned property. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded from this ideal. This historical example illustrates a recurring theme. Freedom is often defined by those in power, and its benefits are rarely distributed equally. Fast forward to the modern era, and the paradox of freedom becomes even more apparent. In the 20th century, the world witnessed the rise of totalitarian regimes that promised freedom but delivered oppression. Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, and Maoist China all claimed to liberate their people, yet their citizens lived under constant surveillance and control. These regimes exploited the human desire for freedom, using it as a tool to consolidate power. But even in free societies, freedom is not without its contradictions. The United States, often seen as the bastion of liberty, has a history of slavery, segregation, and systemic inequality. The Declaration of Independence proclaims that all men are created equal. Yet this ideal has been repeatedly undermined by racism, sexism, and economic disparity. So, is freedom a universal truth, or is it a privilege reserved for the powerful? Religion, too, has played a significant role in shaping our understanding of freedom. In Christianity, freedom is often associated with spiritual liberation, the idea that true freedom comes from surrendering to God's will. In Buddhism, freedom is achieved through the cessation of desire and the attainment of enlightenment. These spiritual perspectives suggest that freedom is not about external conditions, but about inner transformation. But does this mean that external freedom is irrelevant? Or is inner freedom impossible without a foundation of external liberty? The Enlightenment philosophers, such as John Locke and Immanuel Kant, argued that freedom is a fundamental human right, rooted in reason and morality. Locke believed that individuals have natural rights to life, liberty, and property, which governments must protect. Kant, on the other hand, saw freedom as the ability to act according to rational moral principles, rather than being driven by instinct or desire. These ideas laid the groundwork for modern democratic societies, but they also raise important questions. Can freedom exist without responsibility? And who decides what constitutes a rational moral principle? In the 19th century, Karl Marx offered a radically different perspective. For Marx, freedom was not about individual rights, but about collective liberation. He argued that true freedom could only be achieved through the abolition of class structures and the establishment of a communist society. In this view, individual freedom is meaningless without economic and social equality, but history has shown that attempts to create such societies often result in new forms of oppression. So is collective freedom possible, or is it just another utopian dream? The 20th century also saw the rise of existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, who explored the concept of freedom in a world devoid of inherent meaning. Sartre famously declared that man is condemned to be free, meaning that we have no choice but to make our own decisions and bear the consequences. This idea is both empowering and terrifying. It suggests that freedom is not a gift, but a burden or responsibility that we cannot escape. But if freedom is so burdensome, why do we crave it so deeply? Camus, on the other hand, saw freedom as a form of rebellion against the absurdity of existence. In his view, life has no inherent meaning, and the universe is indifferent to our struggles. Yet, by embracing this absurdity and asserting our freedom, we can create our own meaning and live authentically. This perspective challenges us to rethink our assumptions about freedom. Is it about achieving a specific goal, or is it about the process of self-discovery and self-creation? In the modern world, the concept of freedom has become even more complex. The rise of technology, globalization, and social media has created new opportunities for freedom, but also new forms of control. We have the freedom to connect with people across the globe, but our online behavior is constantly monitored and manipulated. We have the freedom to access vast amounts of information, but we are also vulnerable to misinformation and propaganda. So, is technology expanding our freedom, or is it eroding it? Social media, in particular, has become a double-edged sword. On one hand, it empowers individuals to express themselves and mobilize for social change. On the other hand, it creates echo chambers, where people are exposed only to ideas that reinforce their existing beliefs. This phenomenon, known as confirmation bias, limits our ability to think critically and engage with diverse perspectives. So does social media enhance our freedom, or does it trap us in a virtual prison of our own making? Artificial intelligence, AI, poses another challenge to our understanding of freedom. As AI systems become more advanced, they are increasingly used to make decisions that affect our lives, from hiring and lending to law enforcement and healthcare. But who is accountable for these decisions? And how do we ensure that AI respects our freedom and autonomy? These questions highlight the tension between technological progress and human values. Can we harness the power of AI without sacrificing our freedom? The environmental crisis also raises important questions about freedom. As the planet faces the devastating effects of climate change, we are forced to confront the limits of our freedom. Our desire for economic growth and consumption has come at the expense of the environment, threatening the freedom of future generations. So, is our current notion of freedom sustainable? Or do we need to redefine freedom in a way that balances individual liberty with collective responsibility? In the realm of personal relationships, freedom is equally complex. Romantic relationships, for example, often involve a delicate balance between intimacy and autonomy. Too much freedom can lead to detachment, while too little can result in control and dependency. So, how do we navigate this tension? Is true love possible without sacrificing freedom? And how do we respect the freedom of others while maintaining our own? The concept of freedom also intersects with issues of identity and belonging. In a globalized world, many people struggle to reconcile their individual freedom with their cultural or communal ties. For example, Immigrants often face the challenge of preserving their heritage while adapting to a new society. This tension highlights the complexity of freedom. Is it about breaking free from constraints, or is it about finding a balance between individuality and connection? Friedrich Nietzsche, the provocative 19th century philosopher, offered a radical perspective on freedom. He believed that traditional morality and religion were tools used to suppress individual freedom and creativity. In his view, true freedom could only be achieved by transcending societal norms and embracing one's own will to power. This idea challenges us to question the foundations of our beliefs and values. But is Nietzsche's vision of freedom liberating, or is it a recipe for chaos and nihilism? In contrast, the philosopher Hannah Arendt emphasized the importance of collective freedom. She argued that freedom is not just about individual autonomy, but about the ability to participate in public life and shape the future of society. For Arendt, freedom is inherently political. It requires a space where people can come together, debate, and act collectively. This perspective reminds us that freedom is not just a personal goal, but a shared responsibility. The psychologist Erich Fromm explored the psychological dimensions of freedom in his book, Escape from Freedom. He argued that while freedom is a fundamental human need, it also creates anxiety and uncertainty. To cope with these feelings, many people seek refuge in authoritarianism, conformity, or consumerism. Fromm's insights shed light on the paradox of freedom. Why do we fear the very thing we desire? And how can we embrace freedom without being overwhelmed by its challenges? In the modern world, the pursuit of freedom is often intertwined with the pursuit of happiness. But are these two goals compatible? In some cases, the pursuit of freedom can lead to isolation and alienation, while the pursuit of happiness can involve sacrificing freedom for security and comfort. So how do we reconcile these competing desires? Is true happiness possible without freedom? And is true freedom possible without happiness? The philosopher Isaiah Berlin distinguished between two types of freedom: negative freedom and positive freedom. Negative freedom is the absence of external constraints, the freedom from interference. Positive freedom, on the other hand, is the ability to act according to one's true will, the freedom to achieve one's potential. This distinction highlights the complexity of freedom. Is it enough to be free from external constraints, or do we also need the resources and opportunities to realize our freedom? In conclusion, freedom is one of the most cherished and contested concepts in human history. It is both a universal aspiration and a source of profound tension. As we navigate the complexities of the modern world, we must continually question our assumptions about freedom and strive to create a society that balances individual liberty with collective well-being. Ultimately, freedom is not just a right or a privilege, it is a responsibility, a challenge, and an ongoing journey. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of freedom. If you enjoyed this discussion, please like, share, and subscribe for more philosophical insights. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What does freedom mean to you? Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning.